Dow Meeting Archives, February 21st, 2016. Train Your Brain by Ed Monaghan.
Let's go ahead and get started with the meeting beginning ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加多一点传心鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Hey everybody, how are you? It's nice to be here. Nice to see everybody. Nice to see all of you guys. I don't know if you met, that's my wife, Joanne. So nice to see everyone online as well. Bill, great to hear your story. I'm sorry you had the incident with your heart, but I strongly relate to what you're experiencing because I have the same condition, the arrhythmia, the atrial fibrillation. So it's been one of the greatest teachers I think I've ever had. When Joanne and I got married, we had a medicine man from a tribe up where she is from, Canada, who married us. And his primary direction when we got married was to speak from our hearts and not from our head. So it's been an ongoing theme in my life for quite some time to really give attention to the heart. And on a metaphorical level, I think there's a substantial amount of meaning as related to the rest of my life. So what I'm going to get into today is a bit of an elongated version of something we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. And this is something that we present to students at our facility, as some of you know, which name is Ekata, which means oneness, unity in Sanskrit. And this is going to take more than one presentation, so this will stretch into a few, so I'll just go for the 30 minutes, right?
30 minutes, good.
Okay, and then we'll shut down and Derek will take back over again. But one of the things that we specialize is contemplative practice and meditation. That's something that I've done for, about 35 years or so. And what we focus on is being able to train your brain, as you can see in this first slide. And I am hitting the arrow keys and they're not going anywhere.
No, let
me just try this.
Yeah, just test it. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so we'll just click. So the beginning question here that we typically ask most folks is, do you experience anxiety and stress? I think in our society it's something that we all kind of typically experience. Everybody can universally say, yeah, I get stressed out about a variety of things, and usually to a relatively extreme degree under a lot of circumstances. So one of the things that we want to begin to do is develop positive patterns of behavior, and a lot of times people have a great deal of difficulty doing that. So when it comes to meditation, having a positive perspective, good health practices, this can be a daunting task. What we've found is that as we recommend meditation twice a day for people, it's pretty tough for people to sit still and be one with themselves, with their thoughts for a period of time. It's pretty hard. Just like I need to lose 10 pounds. So this year I'm going to do it. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to stop eating cruddy foods, and I'm going to lose whatever that amount is. Most of the time what generally happens, and you guys can certainly check and see if this is the case with you or not, but my experience has been that many people have a great deal of motivation initially, and then it lasts 2 or 3 weeks, and then it just sort of fades into nothingness, and then we revert back to the habits that are relatively common. So the quandary with this is we've established that we have this problem of being able to maintain positive health practices, doing stuff that's good for us. And so once we've established that we have a problem, we have to kind of figure out how to surmount that obstacle. So if we identify the problem, that's the first step. Second, we have to acknowledge that the problem actually exists, because denial is certainly a factor. I don't know about your experience, but mine in my world is that I will experience a great number of people who, in their attempt to develop healthy practices, first don't even realize that they're doing anything that's kind of productive for their health. So you have to first actually acknowledge that there's an issue before you can address it. And then you have to examine the root of the problem, whatever that may be. This is just logical. So if we look at some of the statistical data surrounding health practices, this has to do with children and adults. So let's take a look at what is occurring with respect to the way that we approach health practices. These are from the United States. There are 10 million students who are on antidepressant medications. That's from the Department of Health and Human Services. There are 4 million children who suffer from learning disorders. 44% of college students are binge drinkers. This one is probably the most disturbing to me. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among teenagers. That is substantive as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, it's a tough time as we evolve into adulthood, but really should the level of stress be the point to which we're wanting to take our own lives? That seems absurd, but it's clearly a substantial issue, and it's one that's quite real. We're seeing that 10% of children between the ages of 2 and 5 are beginning to show teenage levels of tension, anxiety, and fear. We see this every day. I see it in my research. I see it in our facility. There are many examples of very small children who are exhibiting these instances of stress. So if adults are feeling stress and they have small children, where is that stress going to manifest? It gets passed down. So this is why we're seeing this massive problem. And then the bottom statistic is 70% of students with mental health problems are not getting help that they need. So we're identifying that there's a big problem, but how do you even address that? And that there's a huge amount of people that are not being able to actually address the issue. Well, let's look at the opposing end of the spectrum. So here's the baby boomers. Baby boomers are basically anyone who was born 1964, between that and the Second World War. And again, if you kind of look at the statistical data, it doesn't paint a very happy picture. 72% have chronic diseases. 52% report a sedentary lifestyle. 43% high blood pressure. 39% obese. That's not just a little overweight, that's obese. 24% walking disability, 16% diabetes, 13% COPD, which is basically slowly smothering to death. So we've all heard about this stuff. We know that there's an enormous amount of issue when it comes to health, when it comes to health practices, when it comes to stress and mental health. But, so we identify we've got a problem. So if we acknowledge the problem, that's kind of sad. When you look at it, it's pretty depressing when you look at those statistics. But we have to acknowledge it before we can come to the other side of it. So what is the cause of really these types of behaviors, when we look at our inability to shift patterns of behavior that we know are not good for us. I know that when I walk by that pantry, I need to leave those potato chips alone. But every time I walk by, I go, I come up with some kind of rationalization that still makes me go for the potato chips. I know that I should go out and take a long walk. I know that I should go and exercise every day. But why am I not actually doing that? The core of it, the root, has to be the thoughts. This is the core of behavior. It's the core of everything that leads to action. So if we look at the root, it really has to do with this. So if we bring a slightly different perspective to this process, and we take a look at these issues of the mind, then perhaps it's reasonable to entertain a slightly different perspective. And one of those perspectives that I'd like to bring to examine today is one from an allegorical representation of this, which is a story called The Lion Who Became a Sheep. And this is in a small book, from a larger book by Paramahansa Yogananda, who is the founder of the Self-Realization Fellowship. So I'm just going to read this to you out of the book, and then we'll examine it a bit. Let me go to the right page, and then I will. Once there was a huge lioness, pregnant and half-starved. As the days passed, and the baby lion grew heavier within her, she had a hard time moving around in quest of prey. Even when the lioness successfully stalked some creature, she wasn't quick enough to pounce, so failed every time to capture her prey. Roaring with sadness, heavy with the baby lion, and pining with hunger, the lioness roamed through the forest and finally fell asleep in a shade grove of trees bordering a pasture. As she was dozing, she dreamt that she saw a flock of sheep grazing. Trying to pounce on one of the dream sheep, she jerked and woke up to behold in reality a large flock of sheep grazing nearby. Overwhelmed with joy, forgetful of the baby lion she was carrying inside her, and impelled by the madness of unappeased hunger, the lioness pounced upon a young lamb and disappeared into the depths of the jungle. The lioness had not even realized that, owing to the severe exertion of her mad leap for the lamb, she had given birth to her cub. The sheep were paralyzed with fear at the attack, but when the lioness departed and the panic was over, they awakened from their stupor and noticed the loss of the lamb. As the flock bleated out lamentations in sheep language, they noticed to their great astonishment the helpless baby lion mewing in their midst. One of the ewes took pity on the cub and adopted it as her own. Several years passed. The orphan lion, now a mature beast with a long mane and tail, roamed with the flock, behaving exactly like a sheep. Bleating instead of roaring and eating grass instead of meat, the strictly vegetarian lion had perfected himself in the weakness and meekness of a lamb. It so happened that one day another lion strolled out of the nearby forest, which opened onto the green pasture, and to his delight beheld the flock of sheep. Thrilled with the joy and whipped by hunger, the strong lion pursued the fleeing flock of sheep, wherein to his great amazement he noticed the husky sheep lion, tail high in the air, also fleeing at top speed ahead of the sheep. The pursuing lion paused for a moment, swishing his tail in astonishment and pondering within himself, I can understand sheep flying away from me, but I can't understand why a stalwart lion should run too. This runaway lion interests me. Spurred by determination to get to the fleeing lion, he raced hard and pounced upon the escaping beast. The sheep lion fainted with fear. The other lion was more puzzled than ever. Slapping the sheep lion out of his swoon, he rebuked him in a hoarse voice. "Wake up! What's the matter? Why do you, brother lion, fly away from me?" The sheep lion closed his eyes and bleated out in sheep language, "Please let me go. Don't kill me. I'm just a sheep from yonder flock that fled away and left me." "Ah, now I see why you're bleeding," said his captor. He pondered a moment and then seized the mane of the sheep lion with his mighty jaws and dragged him toward a lake at the end of the pasture land. When they reached the shore of the lake, he pushed the deluded creature's head over the water so that he was reflected there and began to shake him violently, for the sheep lion still had his eyes tightly closed. "What's the matter with you?" asked his captor. "Open your eyes and see that you are not a sheep." "Bleed, bleed, bleed! Please don't kill me. Let me go. I'm not a lion, but I'm just a poor meek sheep," wailed the silly beast. The other lion, angry now, gave his captive a terrible shake. Under the impact of it, the sheep lion opened his eyes and was astonished to see in the water a reflection not of a sheep's head, as he had expected, but a lion's head, like that of the one that was shaking him with his paw. Then the big creature said in lion language, "Look at my face and your face reflected in the water. They are the same. And this voice of mine roars. It does not bleat. You must roar instead of bleating." The sheep lion, convinced, tried to roar, but at first succeeded in producing bleat-mingled roars. But under the slapping paws and exhortation of his friend, he at last succeeded in roaring effectively. Then both lions leapt across the fields. The foregoing story fittingly illustrates how most of us, though made in the all-powerful image of the divine Lion of the universe, remember only being born and brought up in the sheepfold of mortal weakness. So we bleat with fear at the predators of sickness, lack, sorrow, and death, instead of roaring with immortality and power and preying on the mortal delusion and ignorance. So I'm going to read the rest of this, which is something that Paramatsa Yogananda wrote, which is sort of a semi-commentary on the story. A cub of the divine lion, somehow I found myself confined in a sheepfold of frailties and limitations. Fear-filled, living long with sheep, day after day I bleated. I forgot my off-riding bellow that banishes all enemy sorrows. O invincible lion of the self, thou didst drag me to the waterhole of meditation, saying, "Thou art a lion, not a sheep. Open thine eyes and roar." After thy hard shakings of spiritual urge, I gaze into the crystal pool of peace. Lo, I saw my face like unto thine. I know now that I am a lion of cosmic power. Bleeding no more, I shake the air forest with reverberations of thy almighty voice. In divine freedom I bound through the jungle of earthly delusions, devouring the little creatures of vexing worries and timidities, and thy wild hyenas of disbelief. O lion of liberation, ever send through me thy roar of all-conquering courage. And that's from a book called Whispers of Eternity. So what does this all have to mean? As I read this, it struck me how relevant this is, that we feel so weak and so helpless, and that we're a part of this unity. So in the process of contemplative practice, in meditation, we're connecting with that sense of oneness, that sense of unity, that something that we're all from, that we're all a part of, the Tao, that has endless resource and endless power. So this illusion that's referred to in Buddhist practice of a lack of substance in the relative world of experience, the absolute world of experience is all-encompassing, enlightenment, awakening, to where we see this complete unity And the path by which we achieve this is meditation. It's this continual practice of contemplation, of becoming aware. So I thought that was particularly relevant when it comes to gaining a new perspective. So when referring to the principle of mindful awareness or mindfulness, this principle is actually training our brain. So the actual definition of mindfulness is the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. And non-judgment is a very important part of that process. So when we think about how we train our brain, we bring this attentiveness, this awareness, to rest and to action. So what does that mean? There are many stories of ancient sages who gave up their title from the Brahmin caste and joined the lowly laborers so that they could take on physical labor to be fully present in their bodies in every moment. So it wasn't enough to just go into a state of meditation that was just stillness, but living life and bringing that same essence of awareness was their most important goal. So moving to the realm of simplicity, they gave up all else just to be simply in each moment with physical activity, as well as their own individual static meditative practice. So what this does on a scientific level, we know that the principle of mindfulness trains the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And this is the part of our brain that helps us to say no to emotional impulses. It is the part of our brain responsible for destructive and disturbing emotions. This principle of mindfulness and the action of it actually widens the gap between impulse and action. And it's also the part of our brain that's responsible for empathy, for compassion. So as this begins to occur, we find a point of focus. So for instance, in Zazen, the principle of that form of meditation is the focal point of the breath, as it is in many other practices. So we focus on this point of the breath and counting the repetitions of the breath 1 through 10. Every time that the mind moves into the imagination, into fantasy, and we recognize the mind is left, and we gently guide the mind back to the sensation of the breath and back to the count, we're in essence doing a repetition for our brain. So it's the same thing that we do with exercise. If you go to the gym and you do one repetition of one exercise, is that going to help you very much? Probably not, right? So it's the same thing that we practice mentally. With every repetition, with every time we guide our thoughts back to this simple awareness, to that sensation of stillness, that is creating this thickening of the neocortex. We know this scientifically. There have been recent studies from Harvard that have come out and have actually proven this. So this is actually what we're doing to train our brain. And we can do this on a regular basis just walking around in life. In Zazen, we practice walking meditation, and the emphasis being on the sensation of every nuance of the process of walking, of moving the body, of being in space. And as we do that, and our mind leaves and goes away every time we bring it back, that's strengthening that portion of our brain that's responsible for all of these very relevant elements that bring us peace, that bring us the essence of living in happiness. So every time we do that, and every time we move back to this place of having a positive thought, it's doing a rep for your brain. So as we move into this practice and we begin to think of things from a slightly different perspective, there's a couple of things that are relevant. Number one, you have to be open. I used to be not so much of an open guy, and I found that I had to embrace other ideas if I were to gain any sense of peace and happiness. I also had to reach out and learn to embrace what may be considered as unconventional. Because if you kind of think of these things, you know, the aversion that most people have is, I don't want to sit still, I'm wasting time. If I meditate, it's just burning off 20 minutes or a half an hour that I could be doing something else with. Really, you have to embrace a different perspective. Third thing is you have to be very committed to that process, because it's the repetition over time that really yields the results. It is not a quick fix. You will gain a sense of peacefulness. We've all done meditations to where you kind of feel good when you come out of it, but the long-term effects, those are what are most relevant in terms of the behavioral changes. And then, last thing that I sometimes forget about is you got to have fun when you're in the process of doing this, because it isn't the perspective of, I've got to go torture myself and be the wandering ascetic who denies myself of all the boundaries of life in order to try to, and if we look at the Buddha's path, he discovered the path of moderation. So it wasn't about complete denial and being miserable in order to find peace. It's really about embracing the joy. And that sets the stage for what we'll move into next week in the next portion of the talk.
Very nice.
Thank you, guys.
One quick question for you, Ed. As in your work as a professor at UCLA, do you notice among your students a reflection of the statistics that you cited, a sense of dissatisfaction, depression? Hopefully they're not binge drinking while in class with you.
Well, yeah, the answer to the question is absolutely. I do. And we have statistical data. I hesitate to share the specifics of it, but several years ago, we found that there was an enormous percentage of our department, the students in our department, who are on psychotropic medications.
Wow.
And I mean an enormous percentage. And you see it reflected in the stress level of the kids. I'm not good enough. I'm comparing myself with this whole body image thing of I've got to be perfect, I've got to be acceptable, I've got to be accepted, I have to fit in, I've got to be enormously successful in material terms, just all of this pressure. And it's all self-imposed. Well, it's imposed on a societal level, but it's adopted and embraced individually. So the perspective is skewed, is clearly skewed. So it's not that all of them are like this, but I mean it's a pervasive problem.
Yeah. Maybe one manifestation is the field work. The sense of dissatisfaction, pressure from society, causing many of these college students to embrace an unconventional candidates who's promising a political revolution.
Well, yeah, I think that's a manifestation of it. Yeah, absolutely. Wanting something different, than just status quo. And I think we're seeing this bubbling up of consciousness, and that's certainly a manifestation of it. You had a question? We have 3 to 5 year olds at our facility. We start meditation. When when put in kid terms. We discovered a wonderful little tool. It's called Ozzy the Mindful Owl. And these folks are from Canada at a workshop that we attended on conscious parenting. Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah. Now, you can't expect a 3-year-old to sit for 30 minutes and meditate. You know, there's not a chance. But when you have, but you can go for 20 seconds. You can go for 30 seconds. And there are these wonderful simplistic lessons. So Ozzy is this little owl, he's a little stuffed owl, and he has a little meditation mat that he sits on. And there's a little snow globe. And Ozzy's in the snow globe, right? When you shake the snow globe, we've actually found that this resonates more with the parents in our facility. It does with the kids, but the parents really start to get it. And so when you take the snow globe and you shake up the snow globe, and the kids love the snow globes, so the flakes are representative of our thoughts. And when you set the snow globe down, it's a representation of stillness. And so all the flakes begin to settle to the bottom of the globe, and the liquid surrounding Ozzy is clear. So the metaphor is that now we have clarity as our thoughts settle. And the kids get it like this. And they have very simple meditations, like the first little lesson that they do. All they say to themselves is, I am love. That's it. I am love. And you just say that over and over and over to themselves. And it's a wonderful tool. So, little devices like that can be very helpful. And when the parents, one of our big buy-ins is that we've got to have parents, our after-school director calls it parents on the court. We have to have parents who buy into the concept because they have to be reinforcing that at home. So when the child, if they see mom and dad meditating, they join in, and then they join in for a very finite period of time, but they become a part of that culture, and that's what ultimately rubs off. So thank you, guys.
起立，面向佛堂，持下三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持下各位点传是一鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。Okay, we're done for now, everybody. We'll continue on next time.
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http://taoism.net/tao/connect-online.